What if I told you that a small six-cylinder engine, one that nobody respected, one that everyone laughed at, ended up beating the fastest V8 supercars in Australia, and it happened because of a scandal so big that the government got involved? Yes, you heard that right. The government. Not just car companies. Not just race teams. The actual government stepped in and killed the fastest cars in the country in just 4 days. And the funny part is, most people still get this story wrong. They think a little six-cylinder engine called the 202 was the one that got banned, but that is not what really happened. Today, we are going to break down the real story, the real timeline, and the real reason why this engine became a legend at Bathurst. So stick around because this story has politics, secrets, rain, and one 27-year-old driver who became a hero in a single afternoon. But before we start, if you love classic muscle cars, racing history, and stories that most YouTube channels never talk about, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It really helps this channel grow, and trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming in this video. Let us go back to 1963. This is where everything begins. Holden had a problem. Their old engines were getting outdated, and they needed something new, something powerful, something that could last. So they brought in an engineer named Ed Sllins. And instead of copying an existing Chevrolet engine like everyone expected, he did something different. He built a completely new inline six-cylinder engine from scratch. This was risky. This was expensive. But Holden believed in it. This engine became known as the Red Motor, and it was introduced in the Holden EH. Now here is the smart part. Ed Sllins gave this engine a 7-main bearing crankshaft. Now if you are not a car person, do not worry, I will explain this simply. Think of the crankshaft like the spine of the engine. The more support points it has, the stronger and smoother it runs, especially at high speed. Most engines back then had fewer support points, which means they could crack or fail under pressure. But this one had 7. That is a lot of strength packed into one engine. This one decision is the reason this engine survived for decades and became famous later on. Quick question for you before we move forward. Did you know that some engines from the 1960s are still being rebuilt and used today because of designs like this? If you knew that, drop a comment below saying I knew that. And if you did not know that, drop a comment saying mind blown. Because trust me, more surprises are coming. Now let us talk about how this engine grew over time. It did not just jump straight to 202, it evolved. First it was 149 cubic inches. Then it grew to 179, then 161, then 186. Each time, engineers improved it a little more, made it a little stronger, gave it a little more power. And finally, in July 1971, with the launch of the HQ Holden, the engine reached its final and most famous size, 202 cubic inches, which is about 3.3 liters. This was the version that would go on to make history. This was the version that nobody expected to become a legend. Now here comes the real drama. At this point, Holden was facing a monster on the racetrack. Ford had the Falcon GTHO Phase 3, a massive 5.8-liter V8 monster driven by the legendary Alan Moffat. This car was fast. This car was loud. And this car was winning. Everyone thought bigger engine means better car. But Holden dealer team manager Harry Firth, who people called the Fox because he was clever and sneaky in the best way, had a different idea. Instead of trying to build a bigger engine to compete with Ford's V8, he decided to go small and smart. He chose to race the LC and later LJ Torana, a lightweight compact car. His strategy was simple but brilliant. If you cannot outpower them, outcorner them. If you cannot beat them in a straight line, beat them around the corners and under braking. Mount Panorama at Bathurst is famous for its sharp corners and elevation changes, so a lighter car that could turn quickly and brake late had a real advantage there. This decision would later turn out to be the smartest move. Now here's where the real scandal begins, and this is the part most people get wrong. So pay close attention. By mid-1972, manufacturers were preparing AWA's homologation specials. These were basically road cars built in small numbers so that a racing version could be used. And these cars were fast. We are talking about nearly 160 miles per hour on public roads. Holden was preparing a V8-powered Torana called the XU2. Ford was preparing the Falcon Phase 4, and Chrysler was preparing their own V8-powered charger called the E55. Imagine three companies all racing to build the fastest road-legal supercar in the country. It was like an arms race. But then, something happened that nobody expected. On June 25th, 1972, a journalist named Evan Green published a front-page newspaper article about these upcoming supercars. And this article did not just report. It created fear. It created panic. It made these cars sound dangerous, like they were street racing machines that could kill people on public roads. And once that story hit the front page, it spread like fire. People got scared. Politicians got scared. Within days, transport ministers and even the federal government stepped in. It was not just public opinion. The government actually threatened to ban the registration of these cars. On top of that, and this is a huge deal, they threatened to pull lucrative fleet purchasing contracts from these manufacturers. Fleet contracts were a massive part of their income. Losing them could cost millions. So think about this from their point of view. Do we keep building our supercar and risk losing our biggest source of income? Or do we cancel the project to protect our business? It was not a difficult decision. And here's the shocking part. Within just 4 days, all three V8 supercar projects were killed. That is how fast an entire era of Australian motorsport was wiped out. Now here is where I need to correct a myth. Most people think the engine that got banned was the famous 202 six-cylinder. That is not true at all. The engine that actually got killed was Holden's 308 V8. The 202 was never banned. In fact, the 202 was about to become the hero. If you were in charge, and your V8 project just got canceled overnight because of politics, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. What happened next is one of the most incredible underdog stories. With the V8 project dead, Holden's engineers, especially Ian Tate, had no choice but to go back to the small 202 straight-six engine. Everybody thought it was too weak, but Ian Tate and his team were not going to give up. They modified the cylinder heads and changed the differential ratio to 3.08 to 1, allowing for better acceleration and control. It was a precision fix. Now let us talk about race day. On October 1st, 1972, the Bathurst 500 was ready to start. Ford's V8 Falcons were there, Chrysler's Chargers were there, and Holden's little Torana GTRX U1 was there too. But then, nature decided to write the ending. Torrential rain hit Mount Panorama. And I mean serious rain, the kind that turns a racetrack into a nightmare. Suddenly, the 202 design became priceless. See, those Ford V8s had over 300 horsepower, a huge advantage in the dry. But in the wet, with a slippery track, all that raw power becomes a problem. Too much power means wheel spin, means sliding, means losing control. The Torana, with its lighter weight and smoother power delivery, could put its power down more safely. This is why Harry Firth's original strategy paid off in the most unexpected way possible. The car was ready. Driving that Torana was a 27-year-old named Peter Brock. Brock drove the entire 6-hour race completely solo. No rest breaks. Just him, alone, in torrential rain, on one of the most dangerous tracks in the world. Through all of that pressure, Peter Brock brought that Torana home first, beating both Ford and Chrysler. This was his first Bathurst victory. And if you know anything about racing history, you know this was just the beginning. Now, before we wrap up, let us clear up one more myth. Some people say this cancellation was a secret plot by executives in Detroit to sabotage Australian racing. It sounds cool, but it is simply not true. This cancellation was driven by Australian politics, public pressure, and the threat to pull fleet contracts. No secret boardroom conspiracy from overseas. Just local business decisions made under pressure. Sometimes it is just companies protecting their money. So next time someone tells you the 202 got banned, you can correct them. It was the V8 that got banned, and the little 6-cylinder everyone underestimated ended up becoming a Bathurst legend instead. Let me ask you one final question. Do you think Holden would have still won if the weather had been dry, or would the V8S have crushed them? Let me know what you think in the comments. I really want to hear your opinion. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more incredible car history stories. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next video.